February 16th, 1976. Key West, Florida. A man convicted of drug trafficking would skip his bail and drive north from Key West, Florida towards Miami to never be seen again. On the surface, this seems like perhaps a common criminal trying to escape the law. However, this story has spawned a level of intrigue not commonly seen in criminal drug cases. As it turns out, this supposed low-level drug dealer was not just a drug dealer, but a well-known figure within the Key West community. Flamboyantly dressed with his all-red attire, rose-tinted sunglasses, and driving his bright green Ford Galaxy adorned with the words El Jefe on the license plate, this man was none other than the fire chief of Key West. And this man would disappear from the face of the earth, escaping the law, with no one to this day knowing his whereabouts. Now, is it possible that this man was able to evade the law and flee to greener pastures and perhaps sandier beaches? Or was he perhaps killed by somebody else? Today on Unblurring the Unknown, a criminal caper whose escapades have been enshrined in Key West and Florida lore, and with a name worthy of it too. Today, we explore the disappearance of Bum Farto. Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown. As always, I am your host, Dominic, and yes, you heard me right. The person we are talking about today, his name is Bum Farto, and I am not fucking lying either. That is his name, and today on the show, we have the very unique disappearance case of Bum Farto that is very interesting for its premise, but also very much about this character and this person it surrounds. Joseph, aka Bum Farto, was a very interesting man whose life went from aspiring fireman to fire chief to low-level drug dealer along the beaches and streets in a drugged-up, everyone knows each other type of area. So how today's episode is going to work is that we're going to dive into the life and lore surrounding Bum Farto and all the details we have about his early life and career and eventual life of crime, and then into his disappearance, and then at the very end explore some theories about where Bum Farto could have went. It is theorized that perhaps he escaped the law and fled abroad, or even taken out perhaps by some higher-level figures within the drug trade at the time. Who knows? But it is an intriguing story that takes place right within the heart of a tumultuous time within the United States in the war on drugs. And for that, it makes it the perfect backdrop for a crime story and a mystery. Joseph Bum Farto would be born on June 3rd, 1919 in Key West, Florida. Born to Spanish immigrants, his father Juan and his mother Juana. I hope I pronounced that right. I do apologize if I did not. Juan being from Pontevedra in Spain and his mom being from the Canary Islands. The pair would immigrate to the United States in 1902 and settle in Key West after immigrating through Cuba. His family was in the restaurant business and were quite successful for some time until they had to actually sell the restaurant. Now, this would be when the family fell in hard financial times during the Great Depression. Now, just a little fun fact, as someone who has never been to Key West before, I don't understand this per se, but those who have been to Key West, and if you have been to Key West, maybe you understand this a lot more than I do. Now, when the Farto family sold their restaurant, which was named the Victoria Restaurant, they sold it to a fishing buddy of Ernest Hemingway's named Josie Russell, who in turn turned it into the famous Sloppy Joe's Bar, which has become a Key West institution. Now, any of those people that I just mentioned, if you've been to Key West, probably you've heard of Sloppy Joe's. I've been told it's quite popular. I myself have never personally been, but when I was doing research for this episode, it was all over the place. Like, this was a very significant institution within Key West. So I have to imagine if you have been to Key West, let me know if you've been. It seems like quite the little place. Now, but let's get back to the episode. Now, we do have very little from Bum's childhood, and what we do have kind of predates that nickname of Bum. See, Joseph, as he was called is his given name, did not have aspirations of going into the restaurant business like his parents, but rather was enthralled with what was going across the street at the Key West fire station. As a kid, he would often be found at the fire station, bugging the firefighters for free things and spare change. And because of this, the firefighters started calling him a bum, and it just stuck. Joseph was now Bum Farto, which I guess I shouldn't be surprised that it caught on, given that that's kind of a little bit ridiculous, but also it's pretty funny. As Bum grew up, his passion for firefighting kept growing. He would continue to bug and pester the local fire department so much that as he got older, they actually started letting him do odd jobs around the firehouse on the side, in between some of the other jobs he worked around Key West at the time, such as a driver for a local funeral home. Now, despite the constant annoyance he was around the fire station, he continued to rise up and get more and more responsibility, eventually becoming a firefighter in 1942. During this time, he would marry his wife Ether in 1955, and after all the years of practically begging for his dream job, he would get it and actually be promoted to fire chief in 1964. As Bum was an adult, he became a very well-known figure within the Key West community. He would actually manage a Little League baseball team as well, and would be widely known for his questionable style choices and flamboyant personality. His clothes of choice were usually also some type of flashy red color. More than often, he would be seen sporting rose-tinted sunglasses, and it didn't even stop there. His taste and style even extended to his home, with even the walls and carpet being bright red in color. Now, supposedly these odd choices were supposedly hung on Farto's religion, or his belief of Santeria, and I hope I pronounced that right. Now, Santeria is kind of a mashup of a couple different religions into one being Catholicism, and the other being the Yoruba religion, originating from Western Africa. Now, this religion is also often required, sometimes, to include the sacrificing of live birds or animals, and as it turns out, Bum Farto would reportedly do this, sometimes on the hood of his car, out in the parking lot of the local high school baseball games. Now, the red that Farto included in his everyday life, whether that was in his clothes, his rose-tinted glasses, whatever it was, the red that he included in his everyday life was supposedly his way of luring off evil spirits through Santeria. Now, because of this, people in town, some of them, they did not like Farto. They didn't take too kindly to him, and they didn't like the idea of some voodoo witch doctor in town, and especially not when that voodoo witch doctor, quote-unquote voodoo witch doctor, also happens to be the fire chief and in charge of protecting people, when there's an emergency. Oh, and to build on this, the car in question that Farto would sacrifice live animals on would more than likely be his lime green Ford Galaxy, with the words El Jefe, aka the chief, or the boss, in Spanish, on his license plate. Needless to say, Key West had a popular town figure, whether it was through his tactics, or his status, or maybe perhaps some amalgamation of both. Now, it would not be long until Farto would find himself in some hot water with his job as the fire chief. In 1966, Farto would be accused of misappropriating city funds when he would be accused of forging another firefighter's check and attempting to cash it. The check would be for $90.73, and while that doesn't sound like a lot of money in today, if you adjust that amount for inflation, that would be roughly $820. Now, that in and of itself is bad for business, and basically stealing, if you ask me. And maybe of those who sat on the town board wanting Farto's head for this, you could see how they would think it's stealing too. And they wanted his head for this. They wanted him to face criminal charges. However, Farto had an ace up his sleeve, or better yet, an ace on the board. Turns out Farto's nephew, a man named Waldo Valise, sat on the Civil Service Board for Key West. Now, as it turns out, when the system is corrupt, it bails people out and doesn't hold them accountable. And this is exactly what happened here, as the Civil Service Board would not follow through with suspending him from his role as fire chief due to this whole kind of forging checks incident. To my knowledge as well, I could not find the results of this criminal case in question, but the resources I did find alluded to the fact that most of the criminal charges eventually were dropped, and the only thing he really got in trouble for was that he actually threatened one of the firemen who was going to testify against him in this case, and that was found out that he had threatened this fireman, and then that was put in for evidence, and that kind of got him in trouble. But from what I could find, a lot of his other charges were dropped. Now, other than that, I couldn't really find any more info on that case and the criminal outcomes of it, more or less. Moral of the story is that Farto was allowed to keep his job, and under no suspension, thanks to his board member nephew. Now, this in fact would not be the first time the city of Key West city servants would be called into question for some shady stuff. Back in 1964, when Farto got the fire chief job, you had the rumors of corruption running rampant through the town. The FBI got involved, and the fire chief at the time, Charles Cremata, resigned, as did the police chief, George Gomez. Bum was then promoted, and even though the FBI was involved with the town to try and curb this rampant corruption, by the time the early 70s rolled around, it had just got worse, and it would be even made worse through the War on Drugs campaign and the Tampa Mafia. Now, in the late 60s, the Navy base in Key West decided it was time to pack up shop and hit the road. This was after the conflict with Cuba being at its all-time high, especially after the botched Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Key West was at a very precarious position, being closer to Cuba than any other portion of the United States. It left itself very vulnerable to possible attack from the Soviet-aligned Cubans at the time. Now, once tensions fizzled down, the Navy thought it was no longer necessary to have a base there in Key West, so they decided to pack up their bags and leave. Now, this in turn substantially hit the economy of Key West in the tank. Everything tanked, and the economy was badly hurt because of the amount of staff and personnel that was spending their money back into the city of Key West. These people were all gone now. And because of the economy of Key West taking a nosedive, a lot of people started turning to a new business venture that was extremely profitable, that being selling drugs. Bum took it upon himself, like many others in Key West, and started selling drugs on the side as well. Key West's attitude towards the selling of drugs such as marijuana and cocaine was extremely lackadaisical. While Florida at the time possessed very firm drug laws, Key West didn't really seem to care. That, and couple that in with the idea of the city and the town board being corrupt, allowed for kind of everybody to put their hands in the pie, so to speak, or put their hands in the pot of selling drugs, because now all of a sudden you had people getting off the hook for these crimes because everyone knew each other, and as it turns out, everyone was dealing. Farto would regularly meet people and sell them drugs at the firehouse, and this was just seen as something normal during Key West at this time, as everyone, and I mean everyone, was doing this. Now, Farto, as it turns out, was just a small cog in the machine, so of course, it was only a matter of time before the bottom feeders of these drug circles started to get busted. Now, even though Key West was kind of living in the wild west of drug dealing and trafficking, then Florida Governor Reuben Askew ordered an investigation into the dealings happening on Key West, and during this time, the local sheriff's department started investigating as well. Now, in an effort to hope their investigation didn't get leaked at the time, Detective Charles Major Jr., David Stewart, and Lawrence Meggs of the Monroe County Sheriff's Department started assembling evidence against the drug activity for several years happening on Key West, and they did not even tell the sheriff, Bobby Brown, at the time, because of the rumors of town officials being corrupt. Now, the detectives and deputies took the evidence they had gathered to Special Agent Larry Dollar of the Florida Department of Criminal Law Enforcement. Again, that is another great name in this story. You have Bum Farto and you have Larry Dollar. We are compiling the fantastic names in today's episode. Now, at this point, it would start by federal agents, Larry Dollar, and members of the FBI would come together on a group operation called Operation Conch to try and set up sting operations on some of the drug dealers within Key West at this time. And it was now Dollar's time to set up a sting on a bottom feeder, and in this instance, it would be Bum Farto. Larry Dollar would pose as a cousin of Titus Walters, an informant for the police at the time, who had known that Farto had been selling weed and cocaine, and somebody that Farto was very familiar with. And this is where then the plan would be set into motion. Walters, the informant, would introduce Larry Dollar to Bum Farto, and have Dollar pose as a cousin that was looking to purchase some cocaine from Farto. Once the deal would get processed, it would be a slam dunk bust. However, it didn't go exactly to plan. During the beginning of the deal, Dollar would offer Farto a gold diamond ring in exchange for 1 ounce of cocaine. And once they agreed to the terms, Farto would say that he would have to procure the drugs from someone else to then sell them to Dollar. That someone in question would be Manny James, who would be Key West's city attorney at the time, because boy oh boy, does the corruption run deep. This deal would actually seemingly be in limbo for quite a long time when it was discovered that the informant, Titus Walters, would be found murdered in his home, injected with a mix of nasty chemicals, such as drain cleaner and also heroin, and then, just in case if that didn't do the job, he was also found shot in the head twice. Now, even though Titus Walters was dead, this did not scare Farto, and it definitely didn't scare Larry Dollar to not go through with the deal. Titus was a criminal with a rap sheet, and Farto had no reason not to trust him with Larry Dollar. He took the entire thing at face value, and even though it took Farto an entire month to procure the drugs for Dollar, because, as it turns out, Manny James was in the Bahamas at this time, and as investigators dug deeper into this whole Bum Farto Manny James connection, it became more apparent that it looked like Manny James was the dealer, and Farto was just the seller. And in order to stall and not lose out on business, Bum would make a deal with Dollar and offer him a bag of weed as a peace offering until the real deal could go down. And just a reminder, weed was still very much illegal at this point in time, and the police very well could have nabbed him for this, but they were after much bigger fish than just Bum Farto. However, the deal would eventually go down, and Farto would be photographed by the cops doing it, seemingly marking the end of Farto dealing drugs in Key West and essentially booking him a trip to the clink. On September 9th, 1975, federal agents would swarm outside his home in Key West and try to arrest Farto. He would try to make a getaway, but it was extremely short-lived and he was arrested. His arrest would subsequently lead to the arrest of 17 others in the drug bust of Operation Conch. Farto would be put on trial, and even though before the trial he would post bond through a friend of a friend situation through none other than his now attorney / pseudo drug supplier, Manny James. In February of 1976 at his trial, it took the jury only 30 minutes to reach a guilty verdict on 1 count of selling marijuana and 2 counts of selling cocaine, which could land Farto at the time anywhere from 15 to 30 years in prison. Days after his conviction, Farto would approach his wife Ether and tell her that he had some business to attend to up north in Miami. Now, this would be kind of complicated because when Farto was arrested, his car would actually be confiscated, the green Ford Galaxy, and towed by the police. So, Farto decided to go out and rent a car, which would turn out to be a Pontiac Le Mans, and drive it a few hours north to Miami. Now, a few days would pass and suspicions would start to brew about where Bum was, as he magically would not show back up at his house after going to attend some quote-unquote business in Miami. Now, at this time, I don't think his wife thought much of it. However, when the days turned into a week, she knew something was up, and at this point, so did the authorities. They would attempt to try and track down where Bum went, so they went up to Miami and started their search. After a short time of searching, Bum's rental car, the Pontiac Le Mans, would be found abandoned, with no sign of Bum anywhere to be found. Now, to this day, the mystery of where Bum Farto vanished to is still alive and well. No one knows where he could have gone to, and theories have speculated all sorts of things, from being killed by the mob and sent to a watery grave, or perhaps that Farto grabbed what he had left for cash and left the country bound for perhaps the Caribbean, South America, or even Spain. Bum's magical disappearing act turned him into sort of a local legend. People all over Key West were talking about where Bum could have fled to, and some have even taken the extra step and made t-shirts at the time saying, "Where is Bum Farto?" Now, perhaps the biggest clue we ever got about the Bum Farto mystery and where he went off to would emerge in 1980 in Costa Rica. Now, according to some sightings and sources, Farto was supposedly seen at the U.S. Embassy in Costa Rica renewing his passport. Now, of course, this is just my personal opinion, but if his fashion sense happened to stay the same throughout his disappearance, it would make sense that there was a sighting of him, because, I mean, you can't miss the guy. Well, of course, the FBI would follow up on this supposed tip that they received, and they would question numerous locals on whether or not they had seen this man matching Farto's description, and some of them actually did, and stated that they thought he had actually lived in Costa Rica until just the year prior, when the United States actually started pressuring down on Costa Rica to try and return and oust American fugitives from the United States, who had fled the United States to seek refuge in Costa Rica. The United States government at the time was pressuring Costa Rica to say, hey, give us back these fugitives. And at that time, that kind of seems that Bum Farto would be off in the wind again. Now again, this is kind of all happenstance. We don't have concrete evidence of whether or not Farto was even there in Costa Rica in the first place. We have a few sightings, but that's about it. Now, if Farto was indeed living in Costa Rica for the few years since leaving Florida, where did he flee next to avoid the American authorities? I guess that is a big question that remains unsolved if you choose to dive down this rabbit hole of a theory. Later on in 1986, Farto's wife, Ether, would fight to have him declared dead in absentia to claim some insurance payouts, and they would actually go through. Bum Farto would be legally declared dead in absentia on May 26, 1986. Now, even though this would still be the majority of the end of the story for Bum Farto, the mystery and legend of him still lives on in Key West to this day. You actually have museums in Key West where you can see Bum Farto's fire uniforms and desk from his time as fire chief, as well as there now being a musical based on the life of Bum Farto, which first came out back in 2021. You also have Bum Farto being kind of enshrined in pop culture, as he was mentioned in a Jimmy Buffett lyric, R.I.P. Jimmy Buffett, where in this song, Jimmy Buffett speculated that Bum Farto had fled to the Caribbean, and the lyric was mentioned in Buffett's song titled Landfall, and the lyric was simply, bums down in Capos, which would be referencing that he was in Capos, I believe Costa Rica. However, that is pretty much all that we have when it comes to the story, the legend, the lore, the mystery of Bum Farto, and that conveniently leads us into our theories section about where Bum Farto could have went and what happened to him. So with that being said, let's jump right in. Now, our first theory, and let me stop here, there's probably only two big theories here that hold any sort of water whatsoever. So the first one being is that Bum was killed by the mafia. Now, perhaps Bum tried to escape Key West and Florida because of the mafia. Now, on the surface, this would make sense. He got himself caught, and in the process, we don't know whether or not Bum was going to give up others up the chain of command to possibly reduce his sentence or not. Now, of course, we don't know that, and that is very much just speculation, but that often does happen in cases like this when someone very low level in the chain gets busted. They give up their bosses and evidence against them to get themselves out of danger. Perhaps Farto had plans to do that, and the big boss behind all of this, perhaps with the Tampa Mafia or some other drug organization, got wind of this and maybe got wind of Bum's plans to flee the country and decided to take him out to not risk the chance of their business being outed. Now, this is a good theory. However, others doubt this and point out that Farto was so low on the chain of command, it was unlikely that he dealt with any major players or that his life as a dealer would have even been valuable enough to put a target out on, whether that be by the mafia or somebody else. And for that reason, I kind of have to agree with this statement. Again, in a lot of the sources that I found, even people who were interviewed in Key West after Bum disappeared commented how low on the totem pole Farto really was in terms of the drug trade, and that he was just such a small cog. There wouldn't really be a whole lot of motivation to remove him from the picture just because he did get busted. I mean, after all, we don't even really know how good of a dealer Bum Farto was. I mean, it took him weeks, even a month, just to do a deal with Larry Dollar because he personally didn't have any product on him. To me, this sounds like a man who is probably more of an opportunist that dealt drugs as a way to make a couple extra bucks, but mainly procured them from other people. So, Bum gets busted. There's not really enough substantial things there. Okay, he's going to go to the clink no matter what. There's not really a whole bunch of motivation from a mafia perspective or perhaps somebody else to take him out completely, because odds are he never even dealt with any of the major players up the chain of command. Me personally, that's kind of what I believe, and that it probably would have just been more stress than what it was worth for some type of organization or hitman or other criminal, whatever you want to call it. It would have been a lot more effort to take him out of the picture over somebody who never even met anybody up the chain of command, as opposed to just kind of letting him rot in a jail cell. But of course, that's my own 2 cents. Now, the second theory here is that he ran away from the law, and this is the theory I personally like the most. I think perhaps somehow Farto was able to escape the country and tried to outrun the police, and with the possible sightings in Costa Rica and the multiple witnesses saying that he even lived on the island for quite a few years, makes me believe that when the U.S. government started pressuring Costa Rica to give up and oust American fugitives is when Farto realized, hey, the heat's turning up, I gotta bolt, I gotta go somewhere else. And perhaps Farto was renewing his American passport in Costa Rica as an attempt to flee to another foreign country. Now, the theories on this could be endless, but most likely could be somewhere in Latin America or Spain. Now, in my personal opinion, I like the idea that perhaps Farto tried to get even further away from America and went somewhere like Spain. After all, his father was originally from there, so perhaps it could have been some motivations for him to head that way in the world to get farther away from his crimes and farther away from the prying eyes of the U.S. government. Now, this is what I personally believe, and that is where I also think that he more than likely passed away as well, as he was 56 when he disappeared in 1976, and that would make him almost 100 now, if not 99 to 100 years old. So I'm very doubtful that Bum Farto is currently still alive. But in all, I think that perhaps Farto fled to Spain after fleeing to Costa Rica and then living out his remaining life there, perhaps under new alias. Whether or not he brought the red leisure suits he was known for sporting remains unknown, but if he did, he would not be very hard to miss. Now, hopefully, again, he left those tinted shades and leisure suits in Key West when he bolted, but who knows, maybe he brought them with him. I am merely speculating. But when it comes to the case of Bum Farto, it is a very, I would say, a fun one. It's not super duper serious, but there's a little mystery to it, there's a little crime drama to it, and that makes it kind of a fun episode. And when I actually discovered this episode, or this topic for this episode, quite a while back, I kind of stashed it and was waiting for a good time to bring it out. And I'm like, maybe this is the week I bring it out. And, I thought about that for quite some time. Obviously, I've been kind of struggling, to be honest, keeping up with putting out episodes on a regular basis just because of my summer schedule, working, things like that. I know you hear me say that like a broken record almost every week at the end of each episode that I try to get out, but work has been crazy, personal life's been crazy, trying to do as much as I can with the hand I'm currently being dealt in terms of research and then editing and putting all these videos into practice and then uploading them all. It takes an incredible amount of time to put all of these things together, so sometimes I just need that little extra time, so I often opt to keep the week, do a little bit more research for some other episodes as well, kind of get those in the works, just so I can get things started as opposed to trying to rush and throw something together at the last second that might not be the best product, because I want to put together the best product, find all the information for you guys when I do these episodes, and put them in kind of this very easily digestible format for you all on a hopefully week-to-week basis. So again, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Unblurring the Unknown over Bum Farto, the disappearance of Bum Farto, perhaps again, one of the craziest names in crime you've probably ever heard of. It's certainly up there for me. And again, just kind of a fun little crime and mystery episode to break it up for this week, and I hope you all enjoyed it. But all in all, I think Bum Farto probably ran away from the U.S. government as far as he possibly go, went to Costa Rica, probably went to Spain, and lived out his remaining life there. Maybe he became a firefighter in Spain. Who knows? But that is going to do it for me on this episode of Unblurring the Unknown. Again, I appreciate you all being patient with me when it comes to episode uploads. I really appreciate it. I always strive to be as consistent as possible, week in, week out. I apologize that has been a little inconsistent, and I'll keep apologizing for it, even if I do sound like a broken record. I just keep trying my best for you all to put out episodes on a regular basis, because I want to keep doing this. My summer schedules are just so crazy right now. I'm just trying to, again, do the best I can for you all. So you still, those who check out this show and listen to this show very routinely on a weekly basis, you are getting new content on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me on this week's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all on the next one.